Hey, what's up everyone? It is I, the man, the myth, the mustache, Tim, with a brand new video for you all. Welcome to part 4 of What If Deku Could Use Haki. I just wanted to stop by, say hello, and just, tell you to sit back, relax, cause you're in for a treat. Anyway, let's begin the video. The next morning was a peculiar one. The gates of UA were swarmed by the press and media, stopping to try to interview the students. They would only ask about one thing: All Might. Midoriya pushed his way through the reporters without saying a single word to any of them. He was visibly annoyed by this, and even considered using his Conqueror's Haki to get rid of them. But he didn't, because he could practically feel Rayleigh's imaginary fist hitting him over the head for even thinking about it. It took some time, but Class 1A eventually managed to get to their classroom. "All right, class," Aizawa said, snapping everyone to attention. "I went over your results from yesterday's exercise, and you all performed well." Aizawa then turned his expression towards Bakugo. "Bakugo, you're talented. Don't waste it on something so petty." Bakugo only grunted as a response. The sleep-deprived man then turned his expression towards Midoriya. "Midoriya," which grabbed the green-haired boy's attention. Everyone looked at Aizawa in some form of anticipation, wondering why he took so long to continue his words. "Your performance was a thrill and a half," the teacher said. No one knew how to react to this. Not only was it unexpected, but everyone thought that they were hallucinating when they saw a faint smile on Aizawa's face when he spoke. "Moving on," Aizawa said, breaking everyone out of their shock with his usual dull and tired voice. "You need to pick a class representative. I don't care who, but make sure that it's settled before my nap ends," he said before he crawled into his sleeping bag. The class was relieved to hear that they just needed to do normal school stuff, which immediately turned into a war of words for the role of class rep. Eventually, they settled on a voting system where the results came in quickly. Midoriya was elected to be class representative, while Yaoyorozu was elected to be vice representative. Most of the class was pleased with how things turned out, except for Bakugo, who was having his own eruption. Midoriya wasn't bothered by Bakugo's temper. He seemed to be just as calm and stoic as usual, almost treating the role of class representative like something small. But behind that cool layer was an unstable and trembling mass of nervousness. Shortly after the election, Midoriya, Ida, and Uraraka went to have lunch, during which Ida spoke about his reasons for wanting to become a hero. He talked about his elder brother and how he really looked up to him. But he was interrupted by the sound of an alarm. The trio stood up as they heard one of their upperclassmen say that someone had broken into campus, which hadn't happened before. They started to evacuate, but Midoriya didn't get very far before he was pushed around and squashed by the flood of students. The same happened to Ida, who was pushed up against the window. When looking through it, he saw it was only the press that had triggered the alarm. Ida realized what he needed to do, as he forced his face off the glass. "Uraraka, use your quirk and make me float," he shouted through the crowd, hoping that the brunette would hear him. Uraraka answered Ida's call by stretching her arm over the rushing stream of students in an attempt to reach the blue-haired boy's hand. They struggled to reach each other, trying to keep their balance at the same time, but eventually they managed to do it. Ida started floating weightlessly towards the ceiling, before he started using his engines to propel himself forward. The blue-haired boy started to move, but in doing so, he found himself flipping violently. Ida started to get dizzy, but he managed to reach the wall before it grew too severe. "Everyone calm down! It's just the press outside!" The blue-haired boy shouted across the entire hallway. Everyone stopped moving, as they either turned their attention to Ida or the windows. "We're UA students! We need to remain calm and prove that we're the best of the best!" the blue-haired boy shouted, barely balancing himself on an exit sign. Everyone calmed down quickly, as the sound of police sirens sent a steady wave of relief across the halls. Later that day, Midoriya passed the role and duties of class representative to Ida. The blue-haired boy wanted to decline, but Midoriya didn't let him do that. The next day, everyone in Class 1A waited anxiously for Heroics class to begin. Aizawa walked up to the podium. Alright, class. Today, we'll be doing rescue training at an off-campus facility. The students cheered in excitement, but were immediately silenced by Aizawa. The sleep-deprived teacher sighed and continued. I know you guys are excited about costumes, but remember that you haven't gotten used to them and they might hinder your abilities. As he said this, he pressed a button to reveal everyone's hero costumes. Once again, it didn't take long for the class to get changed. Therefore, they quickly boarded the bus that was supposed to drive them to the facility. Along the way, they talked about their quirks, until the topic of Midoriya's abilities came up. Midoriya? Are you sure you don't have a quirk? Asui asked, which was a question that most had. Midoriya looked as calm as ever as he simply answered, Yeah, I'm pretty sure. The class almost expected this answer, so Kaminari took the opportunity to ask another question. Then, how did you get first place in the entrance exam? This was another question that many wanted the answer to, but Midoriya's answer wouldn't satisfy their need. I worked hard and used some techniques that my master taught me, the green-haired boy said, just as calmly as before. You've mentioned your master before. Who is he? Ida asked. Midoriya didn't expect this question, but he still remained calm as he answered. His name is Silver's Rayleigh. He's an old man in his early 80s, and I think he's quirkless too. The entire class was both confused and shocked. When they pictured Midoriya's master, they indeed thought of some old man, but they would never have thought he was an 80-year-old. This made them question what Midoriya actually learned from him. The green-haired boy noticed everyone's confusion, so he spoke up and said, Don't underestimate him. That man, despite his age, is easily one of the strongest people that I know. The class wanted to ask more questions, but they were stopped by Aizawa. Quiet down, we're here. The students exited the bus in a calm manner before they walked into the massive facility. Inside, they were met by someone who looked like an astronaut, the pro hero 13. The students who recognized the hero started to get excited, while Aizawa walked up and asked where All Might was. The teachers lowered their voices as they spoke, but Midoriya still understood enough to realize that All Might had used too much of his time. The teachers then stopped conversing as 13 walked up to the students. She explained that the facility was called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short, and explained how it was made to simulate different types of disasters for rescue training. The hero proceeded to explain about how quirks are dangerous weapons that can kill just as easily as they can rescue, but Midoriya was barely listening to a single word that came out of 13's mouth. He was distracted by something, and he didn't know what it was. It was as if his senses and his observation Haki had picked up something peculiar coming from the center of the facility. Midoriya began to walk towards the stairs, just to see what it was about. Midoriya, you may not have a quirk, but it's still important that you listen. Aizawa annoyingly called out to Midoriya, only to have the green-haired boy cut him off. Quiet! Aizawa, as well as everyone else, was shocked after hearing this. Midoriya had managed to disrespect 2 teachers in less than a minute, and people found that impressive in a bad way. The green-haired boy didn't care, however. He just proceeded his walk until he reached the edge of the stairs. He looked towards the center of the USJ, and he didn't need observation Haki to know that something was wrong. What he saw was a massive black mist that seemed to fluctuate, as if it was alive. What happened next just confirmed the bad feeling inside his gut. From the black mist came dozens of menacing figures, all looking like villains. Midoriya turned his expression to the visibly angry Aizawa. Should I assume those guys are part of the exercise? Aizawa went from angry to confused as he turned his eyes towards the center of the USJ. What he saw made his eyes widen as he quickly reached for his goggles under his scarf. 13, get the students outside. We've been compromised. Those are real villains! The teacher shouted, making the rest of the class go into panic mode. Aizawa looked towards Midoriya with a skeptical look. He wondered how Midoriya knew that the villains were coming in, because he was standing in a spot where he shouldn't have been able to notice it. But he quickly shrugged it off as he turned back to the class. Kaminari, try to contact the outside. The electric boy responded by tinkering with his communications device. The tired teacher put his goggles on as he turned his gaze towards the villains. "Will you be alright?" Midoriya asked. Aizawa didn't look at Midoriya, but he answered, "I'll be fine. Now go!" before charging in to fight the villains. Midoriya and the rest of the class started rushing towards the exit, when suddenly the mass of black mist started covering it. The mist had formed a wall as it spoke. "It's a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. We decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello." The looming mass spoke as two bright yellow eyes formed in it. The class began to shake in fear after hearing the ominous voice of the villain. "Don't you think this is a perfect place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to draw his last breath? I believe he was supposed to be here today, yet I see no sign of him. There must have been some change of plans that we could not have foreseen." The villain had sounded more ominous than before. Midoriya was terrified. He could practically feel his body shaking. This was different from the training that Rayleigh had put him through, because now his master wasn't there to make sure that nothing bad happened. But if it was one thing that his training did teach him, it was to always keep calm and try to properly address the situation. In this case, they needed to get past the villain, but to do that, they needed to find and exploit his weak point. Midoriya took a deep breath and let his mind fall into tranquility. He focused first on the presence of his classmates, but then he focused on the villain. It was dark, and Midoriya could feel how dense it was. Everything about it reeked of evil, as if he knew nothing else, and that alone sent chills down Midoriya's spine. But he kept going. He couldn't stop until he found what he was looking for. Eventually, Midoriya stopped at what looked to be some form of metal that reminded him of a collar, and he smiled. This was the only part of the villain's body that appeared to be solid, so it was the only part that could take damage. "Oh well, it doesn't matter. I still have a role to play," the villain said, breaking Midoriya out of his concentration. The green-haired boy was ready to charge at the villain, aiming for its weak point, but found that both Bakugo and Kirishima managed to beat him to it. The teens attacked the Tower of Mist, sending a powerful explosion towards it. A massive cloud of dust filled the area, and the class seemed to be relieved. Midoriya, however, didn't share that relief, for neither Bakugo nor Kirishima had hit the weak point. As if on cue with Midoriya's last thought, the Tower of Mist revealed himself through the dust. The class stared at the villain, and despair returned to their expressions. "Idiots," Midoriya muttered to himself, aiming it at both the blonde and the red-haired boy. Midoriya then decided he needed to act, but the villain seemed to share that thought as it spread its mist-like body over the entire area. The class was engulfed in darkness, and some were teleported away to different locations. When Midoriya came out of the darkness, he was met with the sensation of cold water. He looked around himself only to find that he had landed in an area with a lake and a ship. This wasn't a good place to stay, so Midoriya began swimming towards the ship. After taking just a single stroke, he stopped himself. He could feel that something bloodthirsty was approaching him from behind at rapid speeds, putting him on guard. Midoriya turned to face the approaching entity, only to find a shark-like villain swimming towards him with its jaw open. Midoriya raised his fists, coating them with Haki, and prepared to fight the water demon, when it suddenly was knocked away by a green figure. Midoriya turned his eyes towards it, only to see it was his classmate, Tsuyu Asui. "Midoriya?" the frog girl called out, before she wrapped Midoriya up with her tongue and dragged him to the ship. Shortly after, Asui arrived with Mineta before she also climbed up to the deck. "Thanks, Asui," Midoriya said. The frog girl gave a blank expression as she bluntly responded, "Call me Sue." Midoriya only nodded. The water then shifted and made some noise, making Midoriya turn his attention towards it. What he saw was an army of water-based villains, all grinding their teeth in wait for their prey. "Bastards!" Midoriya muttered to himself. Both Mineta and Asui turned their heads towards Midoriya in confusion, as she asked, "What was that?" Midoriya quickly changed gears as he turned his attention back to his companions. "We should get out of here. Unless that guy was bluffing, they intend on killing All Might." "Those villains won't be able to do anything against All Might," Mineta responded. Midoriya ignored Mineta's comment as he kneeled and continued to speak. "Regardless, I'm pretty confident they don't know what our quirks are. If they did, Sue would have been thrown straight into the fire zone." Both Mineta and Asui thought for a second, until they realized that Midoriya was right. The two then proceeded to explain their quirks, Frog and Pop-Off, before they proceeded to make up a plan. The only problem was that the villains had decided to interrupt them mid-discussion by damaging the ship. Midoriya got annoyed by this as he walked up to the railing and bellowed, "You're annoying!" as his spirit erupted and exploded into a wave that stretched over the villains and created powerful waves in the water. Sound returned to the surrounding area as the wave died down. What remained of the villains were a bunch of unconscious bodies, floating like dead fish in a pond. Asui and Mineta stared at Midoriya in a mixture of shock and fear, while the green-haired boy face-palmed after calming down a little. He had done something he wasn't supposed to do, and he would have to confront Rayleigh about it. Midoriya let out a sigh of relief before he turned back to his companions. "Well, that escalated quickly. Looks like we don't need a plan anymore. Might as well go and check on how Mr. Aizawa is holding up." The other two only nodded in response, both too afraid to object. The trio snuck over to the sidelines of what could only be described as a battlefield. Aizawa was fighting every villain on his zone, barely pulling through at this point. Exhaustion was getting through to him, and he could barely keep his quirk active anymore. The villains took this as an invitation, as one with hands all over his body began charging towards Aizawa. The hero noticed, but only managed to block the villain's attack with his elbow.
"You shouldn't push yourself, Eraserhead,"
the villain said with a sadistic smile, as Aizawa's elbow suddenly started to crack and crumble into dust. Aizawa jumped back while grunting in pain, only to find that he walked into something. He turned around, but was immediately pinned to the ground by a massive figure. Midoriya watched the scene in horror. Aizawa was being held down by a massive bird-like creature, breaking what looked to be every bone in his body. Blood pooled under the teacher's broken body, and Midoriya could no longer sit back and watch. Midoriya infused his arms with Haki before he charged the beast. Upon reaching it, he punched it straight in the face, knocking the monster back. Midoriya acted quickly, picking up Aizawa before dashing away from danger. The villain stared Midoriya down, violently scratching his neck.
"That was an impressive punch, you brat. Unfortunately, it'll all be for naught."
Midoriya watched in horror as the monster stood back up without a single scratch on it. While Midoriya was being terrified by the monster, both Asui and Mineta had managed to join his side. The green-haired boy broke out of his trance and noticed his companions. The situation was bad. Aizawa had been fatally injured, and they were facing a monster that seemed to be immune to punches. Midoriya then steeled his nerves as he settled on a plan. "You take Aizawa to safety. I'll hold him off until then," Midoriya told Asui and Mineta as he carefully handed the broken teacher over to them. The two wanted to object to the plan, but their words got caught in their throats when they saw Midoriya's expression. He was determined, and his mind wouldn't ever be changed.
"Nomu, get them."
The villain ordered the beast, which charged at command. Midoriya raised his fist in response, coating them with Haki, before he also charged at the so-called Nomu. Mineta and Asui took this opportunity to leave the area, while Midoriya was entering a knuckle brawl with the Nomu. He used observation to evade and counter any attacks. Then he used his armament to increase the damage of his own. The two fought and brawled without any sign of stopping, neither one willing to give in. But Midoriya would soon notice that no matter how much he hit, no matter how hard he hit, the Nomu wasn't contracting any lasting damage. It was as if it had a powerful defense against attacks, and it could quickly heal any damage that it actually took. Nothing Midoriya did had any effect. Nothing he did seemed to matter. But he still refused to give up. The brawl continued with blood and sweat, until a deciding factor happened. Midoriya didn't land his feet right, and as a result, he lost his footing. The Nomu took this opportunity and threw a powerful punch towards its green-haired opponent. Midoriya didn't have enough time to dodge, so he coated his arms in Haki, using them as a shield. The impact was made, and Midoriya's guard was broken as he slid backwards. The beast wasn't finished, however, and charged once more. It threw another powerful punch, and this time, Midoriya couldn't block. The green-haired boy took the punch straight to the jaw, which sent him flying. Midoriya had taken some damage from that attack, but he negated most of it by coating his jaw with Haki. The green-haired boy then landed on his feet before he fell to his knees in exhaustion. The hand-covered villain looked on in frustration, scratching his neck even more than before. He was about to curse the green-haired brat, but was interrupted by a mass of mist forming next to him.
"Tamura Shigaraki, one of them got away,"
the living cloud said. Shigaraki scratched his neck in even more frustration this time, as he said,
Kurakiri, we can't fight a bunch of pros.
The mist shuddered in understanding until it narrowed its eyes before speaking.
"Yes, that may be true, but they won't arrive for quite some time."
Shigaraki suddenly stopped scratching his neck as a deep and maniacal smile formed on his obscured face.
Yes. So we kill all of the hero brats that are here, starting with the exhausted one over there.
As he pointed towards Midoriya, this got much, much worse. Midoriya was now exhausted, and his opponent was barely breaking a sweat. He was clearly outclassed, and the villains were going to kill both him and his classmates for it. Midoriya forced himself back onto his feet as he raised his guard, refusing to give in even in this situation. The Nomu responded by letting out a strained and feral cry before raising its claws. They stared each other down, not breaking eye contact for even a second, until Shigaraki shouted,
"Get hit!"
but was cut off by a loud crashing noise. Everyone, including both villains and students, looked towards the source of the sound, and found that it came from the entrance. The doors had been flung open, revealing a figure standing there. Everyone expected to see All Might, or any hero for that matter, but the person who now stood before them was neither. He was a tall old man, around his late 70s, early 80s, with long silver-white hair, a sword, and a goofy smile on his face. Midoriya couldn't decide whether to look surprised or happy, for he barely needed a glance to know who this man was. The old figure scanned the situation around the USJ, his goofy smile still on his face, as he said,
"Now what in the hell is going on here?"
And that's our video, so thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things I want to go over before the video ends. First, we have a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. So, go check out that if you're in the mood for some jutsu action! Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I would like to extend an invitation to join the team. Our only caveat is we accept members who are 16 years or older. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you be a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. We're always looking for members to join us. And so that's it for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and please, always remember, have a great day.